I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's live webinar entitled Beyond the Hype, the Critical Challenges of AI in Life Sciences. Today's session is brought to you by Asterix. I'll introduce our presenter in just a moment. Before I do that, we can go to the next slide, please. Before I do that, I want to just take a moment and tell you a little bit about who Asterix is. If you haven't attended any of our webinars in the past, I want to welcome you. Thank you for coming. If you're a return visitor, if you've seen some of our webinars in the past, hopefully you liked them enough and you came back. We're glad to have you back. We are a consulting company, and we have, for the past 28 years or so, brought a very unique blend of strategic and technical services, processes and technology agnostic approach that has made us very much a leading partner in transforming the success of life sciences and science-based organizations in digital transformation. That's kind of a tongue twister there, but what it really means is we help life science and science-based organizations transform into the digital age, and that's everything from their R&D to their clinical, from evaluating and selecting different technologies, from helping them put together their technology stack, etc. Now, we're a consulting company, but nearly all of our staff, 90%, hold advanced scientific degrees. We think that's pretty impressive, and it's something that we like to point out because we are a science-based organization helping other science-based organizations. So that's just a little bit about who we are as a company. You can certainly learn more about us at asterixinc.com. We'll get you a link to that on the back end of today's presentation. But let me go to the next slide and introduce our speaker for today, someone I've had the pleasure of sitting in and listening to some of Adam's other webinars, and they're great. They're very, very insightful, and I'm excited to sit and listen with the audience today for this one. Adam is a director of lab informatics delivery here at Asterix, longstanding professional deploying life science solutions throughout the various functions within the lab, which encapsulate the entire product life cycle. Everybody, of course, can read Adam. I'll let you kind of pick up from here, and you can certainly finish off your introduction, and then I'll jump back on at the end and help with questions. But Adam, you can take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the introduction. Yeah, no, it's great to talk with everybody today. I really look forward to taking some of that knowledge that I've kind of learned throughout our implementations and supporting our customers and being able to carry it specifically focused on AI, and calling out some of the areas that maybe don't go at quite as positive for AI at times, but that's okay. That's how implementations happen. It's something that I've been used to throughout my entirety of my career, really helping making sure we're accomplishing the best for some of those most critical programs. So today, what are we going to go through? So here are some of the topics. So first, going to start off, what exactly is AI? Really just want to establish a baseline. Everyone's kind of understanding and belief of it may be a little different, so it'll be good to start with that. Talking about that emotional adaptation and acceptance, right? Getting our users to really be willing to take on AI and understanding where it exists within the products. We're going to talk about the introduction of quantitative challenges, those challenges that are measurable and the outputs that AI will provide. Validating and adapting solution. As we know, AI is always growing and learning, and so it's something that becomes very hard to work in a validated environment. But there are best practices and approaches we can take to really make that achievable. And then lastly, going to end it with some potential repercussions, right? Like I said, sometimes implementations don't quite go the way that we want, and we want to talk about some of those challenges that do come out of those implementations that did fail. So first, starting off with exactly what is AI, establishing that baseline. So artificial intelligence is really just the term used for calling out computers acting as humans, right? So we've been working through the years with our customers of building out what we refer to as big data. Some customers have things like data lakes, data warehouses, harmonized data, things of that sort. It's really going to help support and be able to enable AI. But what is AI itself? It's actually taking that data and being able to think like a human. And the output of it is actually giving us some actual thoughts and outcomes and deliverables from that logic. Now, AI itself, if we take a look at the history, it's actually been around a lot longer than much of us may realize. So in the 1950s is actually when it first came out. And again, this is really just focusing on getting computer systems to exhibit that human intelligence. Really, the 1980s is where AI became to really start to adapt, really carry that capabilities of being able to learn. So this is when machine learning came out. And machine learning is really hyper-focused on taking that artificial intelligence and having it drive based off of historical data. So taking a look at what happened in the past to be able to make decisions and outcomes for the future. In the 2010s is when deep learning really came about. And this is where we started to introduce things like neural networks, actually really replicating the human brain in a more computerized form, and help support building out to where we are today. So in the 2020s, we now have something referred to as generative AI, which I think a lot of people really just call generative AI, but really generative AI is much more powerful than we've ever had before. And of course, it continues to learn and grow as we go forward. And this AI really requires a series of inputs to be able to build in through this logic to be able to then provide an actual output from the AI itself. Now, what is really required to enable AI? And this is where some of our customers are at various stages of it, right? So starting off in the bottom left here, so a digitalized landscape. Of course, if something's on paper, AI doesn't necessarily have that ability to be, making decisions against it. So we need to get all this data, all these results, all this information in a digitalized manner. Making sure we're capturing all of that data, so any of the raw data, results, anything that might support in the algorithms that ultimately AI is driving off of. Removing any data silos, right? Improving that data availability. We don't want the data to only be specific to one particular need. Ideally, the more data that we have, the more ability for AI to actually expand into whatever you're trying to accomplish. And of course, other areas that help support in this digitalized landscape are building out things like your system and your instrument integrations, really removing any of that transcribing, making sure it's in a place where it's readable. Now that we have all of that data, we really need to harmonize on the data, right? Moving away from unstructured data and expanding into more of a structured data footprint, creating the mapping and really understanding where is this data from, what does this data mean, and then building out the storage that's appropriate to be able to complete that traceability. Again, the more information that we can give against this data to really support AI and what it's going to drive for, this is something that's really critical for us to really expect a positive output. Looking at the logical algorithms, so in the top right here, and this is where AI really comes into play. The algorithms in the background are really what's driving in the decisions that are being made. These algorithms are working to learn against past executions, really taking in those input parameters, like we referred to when we were talking about generative AI, driving to what that expected outcome would be. Now, of course, some artificial intelligence performs better than others. Much of it is focused on these algorithms themselves. And then the bottom right here, there's definitely a large component that AI kind of introduces with all the needs is really heavy on the hardware and infrastructure. So we want to be able to be performing these parallel processing capabilities. It's something that's we don't necessarily have available in all areas. You'll see a lot of software vendors may offer AI as part of their products, and they may offer their products on cloud or on-prem, but oftentimes that AI functionality is only available should you be on the cloud version. A lot of times because customers may not have the infrastructure that's necessary to be able to carry. Of course, other areas that are really critical for AI to be effective is making sure our networking is reliable, our data storage capacity is large enough, and of course it has the speed. And then there's a lot of energy consumption that comes as well with all of this processing that needs to happen. Just think replicating things like the human brain, of course, is going to require tons and tons of processing, and that's exactly what you're going to see. And so even though the software side of things, the algorithms and everything may be there, it needs the hardware to be able to support in those efforts as well. Now that we touched a little bit on, what is AI, establishing that baseline, now we're going to move into that emotional adaptation and acceptance. And this is really getting our end users comfortable using. These are some of the key areas to really focus on to make AI more accepted, right? And first, we're going to start off with trust. Really with trust, it's really the belief that AI is going to do better, right? Trust is really built on what is that relationship you have. And for this case, it's specifically, what's that relationship with AI? So maybe someone's much closer with it, has that trust that it's really going to be putting out what they're really looking for. The more and more we see AI used day to day in the improvements in areas such as like security is really just going to help improve on that trust. Now, another one that actually closely relates, but it does have some differences to it, is that confidence. So similar to trust, it's going to bring that comfort that we're looking for, but it's much more focused on the abilities of AI rather than your reliability against it. So the stronger that AI gets and the more capabilities that it's proven it can carry, of course, the more confidence that our users are gonna take on. Much of what supports this is actually right below it. So the training, right? Bringing this information to the end users for them to really know and understand, build that confidence, build that trust. And this is something that we see routinely with our customers that don't incorporate enough training within their implementations. Oftentimes, the training itself is just not complete, or much more of the focus was on the implementation, which is, of course, a critical stage. But this training is really going to make the users adapt into the use of AI much further. It's really going to encourage users to go explore further opportunities, right? So with AI, since it's able to accomplish so much on our training, we really need to focus it on what are the specific outputs or specific functions of AI that our customers are really going to get the most benefit from. But since it can do so much more, we really want to encourage the users to take that on, right? And so giving the users direction is something that's really going to be critical as part of this training. Growth with that AI is not going to come from a single person, but it's really just going to be enabling the team to really venture into areas that weren't previously explored. If you look a year ago of how is AI being used to how it's being used today, it's drastically different, and it's just because everyone's getting creative and really trying to venture out to those unknowns, right? And much of these key pieces that I'm talking through here really relate to each other, and they actually support each other too. So once we have our training, our trust, and our confidence, it also helps support in our understanding, right? Oftentimes today, when end users talk about AI, they may just be jumping and thinking about, oh, we're talking about Hey Google, or we're talking about Siri, and not understanding that artificial intelligence can really expand much beyond that. Really, our customer base is really science focused, so technology is not always the top priority, and we really need to work with them to kind of bridge that gap, make sure they really understand what does AI truly mean, where does it mean within their workflows, building out, what parts of their workflows is it really going to add value to, and how is it going to add value? Incorporating things such as the supporting materials is really going to help with this understanding. So following the implementation, making sure that there's knowledge bases in place, there's SOPs that are updated and accurate to be able to help direct end users on where to go. Those are all really going to help build out that understanding that's really critical for us to get the most amount of where we're going to end on the slide is the value, right? Overall, AI is going to be incorporated into our products, and the goal with it is really to output the most amount of value that makes sense for our solutions. And we want to be able to have that return for the users. The more that the users are getting in return from AI, the more comfortable they are with it, the more they're going to use it, and the further they're going to expand on it. And this also supports others, such as the stakeholders, the system owners, all the way up to the executive level, to being able to see, what were the improvements that AI was able to bring about. And those are sometimes really hard to measure and be able to see. But you'll start to get a sense of it and more comfort with it as our products become more and more aligned with the strengths of AI. It's something that we're really going to look out for. All right, and now continuing on AI, and of course, anytime we're looking to implement any new features or functions, there's always this balance of priorities, right? And we see this with any implementation, not specifically only AI, but let's focus AI for this conversation here. The two main groups that our implementation teams primarily work with are the business and the IT team, right? The IT team have different areas that they're trying to incorporate and focus on, where the business is really much more focused on the usability of those products or functions. And so with it, things like starting off with the business, it's the user experience, right? What's the overall user experience with AI? How is it incorporated into our products? How easy is it to navigate and be able to leverage what it's outputting is a big part of it. Intuitiveness, right? And that's really going to be very similar to user experience, but it's really how well does the end users and the various groups really take it on and start to leverage it with less and less inside people trying to help guide them, and more of them being able to drive in their day-to-day within the labs. That alignment with what their needs are, right? The business team has the needs that they need to accomplish as part of their day-to-day, doing their testing or whatever it may be. We want to make sure that AI is aligned with those workflows and with those needs, and making sure that the business themselves can see that alignment. And then, of course, reliability. If it's something that's not stable, it's not being consistent with what it's outputting, it's going to cause conflict with the business, and it's something that there'll be pushback. And this pushback is something we need to, of course, approach in a methodical way, making sure we're taking their feedback into account. But we really want to encourage the use of AI within the products, and be able to kind of overcome some of those challenges that may be. And some of those challenges that we overcome today are not necessarily challenges that'll be here tomorrow, right? AI is ever forming and adapting. Customers are using it in many different ways. So with that, we can really learn from our past. Switching over to the IT side of things, this focus is much more looking at it from another point of view, right? So starting off with your implementation, right? How do I incorporate AI? A lot of the implementation, like we just touched on, it's getting that data available, making sure we have the appropriate algorithms built into the product that's outputting what we're looking for. What are the efforts that are involved, and how would they go about? How do they impact the current workflows, right? Those are the big understandings that we need to have in place from an IT perspective. The integration. So what does that system landscape look like? How do we make sure it's fitting in and aligning with some of the customers' goals? And then security. Security is a large one. Anytime that we're referring to AI, with the large amount of data that we're using and the access that AI may have to some, maybe more personal confidential data that we don't necessarily want available in other areas, how do we lock that down? Another area that security really comes into play is moving more and more to the cloud. There's less and less data staying within a private network, right? It's expanding beyond that. So security has to remain center of focus. And then that scalability, right? We want to build in systems that are not just focused on today, but they're focused on tomorrow and to come. And that user base, that use of the systems, those the amount of data that we're handling is going to exponentially increase, and we need to make sure that we're able to keep up with that. And it's critical for implementations to be successful for both the business and the IT to be aligned, to be doing this collaboratively and moving forward. It's absolutely something that's a challenge, like I said, even outside of AI, but AI is going to create much more questions than we would typically see with just simply adding digital methods into a system, right? This is creating much more questions, and much of what we're talking through here today is kind of talking through why do those questions exist. Now we're going to start talking about what does AI introduce as far as quantitative challenges. So these are challenges that are measurable, right? What are the challenges that we can see and kind of work through? So first, starting off with that data availability, right? We touched on this a little bit when we were talking about, what is AI? What does it really require? It's measurable to see, how much is digitally stored? Is it structured? Is it traceable? Is it harmonized? We know this is a requirement of AI, but of course it's a large undertaking to bring on for a customer to make sure it's in place and we're setting up your AI implementation for success. The next is understanding the value, right? What is the output of AI? You could see a lot of users actually going in and having AI available as one of their tools, and maybe only a small subset of them are actually using it. And a lot of it is because they just don't know how to use it, or they don't truly know what they're getting from it. The more that we can get that value known, it's going to become more and more acceptable by the users. So we're looking at things of efficiency, right? How is it making me more efficient in my day-to-day? Accuracy, right? Making sure that the data that's being put in and out are both something that we can trust and that is accurate. The usability, how hard is it to use? And really then measuring that ROI. What's our return on the investment? That value is going to be a key number to really understand the return. The hardware requirements, and we touched on this a little bit. So definitely the processing, the storage, and the networking, the critical hardware components of driving an AI, because of how much it needs to really be able to replicate the human brain and the functions that we're really looking for from it and the power that it carries. But also another one to call out is the point of use, right? Our users that are in the labs, how are they going to be calling the AI? Are they on their phones? Are they on their laptops? What kind of applications are they going to be using to really launch it? Where does AI fit in, and how would they actually use it during their day-to-day is something that you'll be able to see. And the more accessible that AI is, then hopefully what the outcome would be is that it's just more commonly used, and that's exactly what we want. The more that AI is used, the more value that we're returning, and that's what we're really driving for. And then another one that we see, and I think is going to become more and more of an item, is really overlapping capabilities, right? All of our customers have a solution landscape that has various different applications that are available today. Each of these applications, have their own strengths and weaknesses, many of which have things like AI built into them. And it now becomes a question of, where should you actually be using it? You may have an ELN that has an AI component that's built into it, and it's really fits well specifically for that ELN data. But how do you access in further other areas? So things like some of the orchestration software that is becoming more and more available, they also have an AI component themselves, and they may have access to more data than specifically that ELN. So knowing which applications to really be focusing on and functions is going to be key. And we're going to continue to see these overlapping capabilities with more and more of the vendors building out to more of a platform model rather than a specific application. Avoidable integrations, right? So if we're using a platform, hopefully everything's all well integrated together. The more systems we have, the more that we're going to have to actually be able to pass data around amongst the systems. Some of these integrations may be avoidable, right? They may be simply being passed to make sure that one application has the latest and greatest up to date, where if we're leveraging things like AI and having these orchestrations in place, we might be able to avoid that, having a single point of reference for some of this data. What is that overall workflow? So within my workflow as an end user, am I having to navigate around to different applications? What does my end-to-end look like, right? When I walk into the lab at the start of the day and I start performing my work, how hard is it to navigate around? Am I having to jump to various different systems? And do I know which system really is the system of truth for that particular need? Is something to really take a look at. And then lastly, technical overhead, right? So having AI put in place beyond things like the hardware, we also have to have the technical components as well, making sure that these integrations are in place, making sure that the solutions are talking with each other appropriately. Much of these additional integrations that may need to be built out, or just additional implementation efforts that potentially could have been avoided should AI have been leveraged in a particular way. We want to try to avoid that, keep costs down, make it so that from a technical standpoint, it's not only easier to implement, but it's also easier to support in the future. All right, now we're going to dig a little bit into the validation aspects of it. And so first, we're going to kind of start off with, what is the common validation approach, and how does AI really impact this? So you'll see on the left-hand side, it may be new to you, it may not be new to you. It's a common SDLC validation plan, right? And so going through the various mechanisms that we follow in a validated world. Much of what you see on the left-hand side of this V is something that's, building out and incorporating into an implementation. We move into the system build at the very bottom of the V, which is us really, providing updates, making changes, putting together what does that specific release look like, to then be able to put a stopping point on what we're going to ultimately deliver with that release, being able to validate and prove it. So today, prior to AI, much of this scope is really defined. It's not going to be changing. It's really predictable of, if I put in this value, this is the output that I'm going to get. We really understand the risks that may be involved, right? It's much less of the unknowns. We really carry that strict version control, right? We're able to control how we run through this V, what's going to be included as part of the scope, what are those releases going to look like. And then, of course, we work with multiple environments within our architecture to make sure we have a dev environment, we have a validation environment, we have a prod environment. Now, as we incorporate AI into this, some of these motions change, and it's something that we need to be able and willing to adapt to. So that input and knowing what the output is going to be is not always there, right? It's something that's moving. This is a newer function, right? Building out AI and validating against it is something that's not truly fully proven. There are definitely some customers that have AI aspects that are validated, but it's really focused, and we're going to dig into some of that in a moment here. But the risk is just greatly increased. It's due to many different factors. So of course, we're dealing with a larger amount of data, just because the more data that we're able to provide AI, the better off we are. The number of integrations, right? This movement of the data itself, the security considerations, knowing what is AI truly going to be doing with the data, having that data up on the cloud in areas that may not be behind a private network. And then the variability and unknowns is actually the largest of it, right? When we're validating something that's not moving, it's very easy to say, this is if you click this button, this is what's going to happen. With AI, that's not necessarily the case, right? We might be making a call, and the output of AI is going to be something that's very unknown, and that's going to be very hard for us to truly validate and be able to prove. But we're going to dig in here in a minute of a couple of ways of going about it to be able to validate it, right? How can we defend what we're putting in place and what we're implementing? Because at the end of the day, that's the importance, right? We want to make sure that we're incorporating a solution that's not going to change. We can defend, it's accurate. Sorry about that. All right, so what are some of these changes that you can incorporate? So the first thing is really be methodical about that specific function, right? Just because AI is available and can do so much, we can really dial it in and focus on areas that aren't necessarily moving or are not as necessarily critical, right? If AI is generating things like results, obviously that's something that has a larger impact to validation. But if I'm specifically using AI to do motions like searching or navigating around or generating a report or just doing an analysis against some of that data that I may have in my system, it's less critical and less of a need to validate to a certain extent, right? It's important to have trust in the report, but the decisions and the output that AI gave are not driving to results or not driving to some of those critical motions that are part of our day-to-day. Another motion that can be incorporated is really incorporating those stopping points for a manual review, right? You can use AI to its fullest as long as the output from that AI, you're taking a minute, you're having the appropriate parties review, verify that it's correct. Of course, this is incorporating a human element of it, so it adds some risk of is that review complete? Is it correct? Was something missed? But it's at least giving a checkpoint that we're able to take a pause, take a second to make sure that it's complete. That checkpoint is something that exists with or without AI. So really, if AI is able to get to that same point, be able to give us an output that we can then take a look at to confirm it's correct. It's just expediting up to that stage, and that's really what we're looking for. Because again, it's all about that value. We want to continue to carry out iterative releases, so having the ability to do these implementations in a smaller bite-sized chunks to really ultimately come to that final solution, right? So when you're looking to incorporate AI, maybe you don't just look to blast it in, have every function and feature and have it in every single application. Let's focus on little areas that are really going to help build that confidence, really build up that comfort with AI, and start to be able to make that adoption easier and easier, especially as AI matures. So as we kind of spoke about, AI is always learning, it's always adapting, and that's something that we need to be able to rely on as well. So we have more and more comfort with the more and more data and more time that AI is processing, so that confidence is going to continue to build as it matures as well. And then this last one's applicable to really any implementation, and it's something that's really needs to be done collaboratively, but really just questioning the validation plan, making sure that we're thorough, making sure it's defendable, making sure it's accurate, but we also have to keep it realistic. So anytime that AI is introduced, of course, there might be someone from the QA department that really has this fear and concern, and let's just take it one step at a time and really understand what those fears and concerns are to really dial in on a validation plan that's appropriate. Going back to that kind of first example, if I just want to incorporate a way that it's easier for users to be able to search for something, so you could say, you know, hey AI, go find the sample that I ran against this particular test. What's its current status? Understanding that that motion is not impactful to the actual data or results that exist within the system, and being able to have that conversation, right? Making sure that we're able to validate it and come to that final agreement, that final place where we're all trying to have that same unified end goal. All right, now we're going to dig into kind of potential repercussions. So this is looking at, okay, should my AI implementation fail, right? Things didn't go well. What's going to happen, right? And these are only some of them. I'm sure you can list out more, but we're going to dig into one of these, or each of these individually here. So first, starting off with the obvious one. So financially, right? There's a large amount of costs that go into implementations. There's licenses, things of that sort. But the other piece of financial that people don't always jump to is, you know, should my AI implementation fail? We're no longer using it. What about that delay in value, right? We invested all this energy and effort and finances into implementing a solution that's going to give us value. If we're not receiving that value, we're also losing out on money at that regard as well. Building that business confidence. So as we know, as we roll out AI, and we've touched on throughout this session, that confidence is really going to be key. Having that business adoption is going to be key. If you go into an AI implementation and it doesn't go well, of course, those future implementations are going to be that much harder to really convince and carry on for the users. It's something that becomes more and more important for that value to increase, to really be able to defend that story. And even though, you know, maybe AI is not ready or not available or not perfect for you today, doing this on the appropriate time to make sure you're not in this case where you're trying to, you know, rebuild back trust off of something that may have not gone well is going to make your life a lot easier. Loss of data, of course, this is something that's really critical. Putting in a motion that's, you know, has so much access to the data and so much control of it, it introduces this risk. This expands beyond things like, oh, maybe I'm missing a result, or this result is it's just not completing the story, right? So I need to be able to defend, this is a result that I had, this is the data that built up to the result. It's beyond that. It's being able to say, this is where this data came from, this is how it was generated, this is the history against it. AI, of course, can kind of introduce some risk with this regard. Being validated, oftentimes there's audits that are involved, and so there could be either a failed or a really challenging audit. So audits themselves, there's a lot of amount of efforts that are put in place for an audit, and these validation approaches against our AI implementations is going to be critical to be able to help defend that. But really defending that is going to be key, because it's not only the time that it's spent, it's also the reputation of the company and what the company's putting out for their future work. And so with AI, it's definitely something you have to be cautious about with those implementations, making sure you're not put into a scenario where you're having a difficulty with an audit. The next one is invalid results. So just as important as, you know, not losing data, we don't want our results to be wrong at all. We need to be able to defend that validity of the results. And this is something that's really not negotiable with the work that we do. That uncertainty of the output can really create some of that concern. And this is something we really need to look out for. And so making sure that what AI is putting out is very critical to be able to help build towards those results. And it's not always about the outputs, it's also about the inputs as well. If we're putting in invalid data that's helping contribute to these invalid results, it's something part of the whole AI implementation that we need to make sure is accurate all the way through. And then stolen intellectual property, right? Security is going to be a very high risk, high conversation, specifically around AI for some of the reasons that we kind of spoke about before. Of course, this data being available in other areas and having the motions that it does in order to use AI to drive in it, we also need to be cautious that this data is staying in the right hands, right? It's staying within the customer. There's not people that should not be getting their hands on it. getting their hands on it. And so we got to make sure that our data stays controlled, confidential, not compromised. And AI is going to introduce some of that risk as well. So that's it for the presentation for today. I hope what I went through was of value. So I really will open up the stage now for any questions that anyone may have.
Yeah, Adam, great. Wonderful presentation, obviously. And again, for the folks that are on, you might not have heard at the beginning, we'll get a copy of this sent out to you probably early next week. Just keep an eye out for the email. It'll also have a link to our full YouTube channel, which we highly encourage you to check out and take a look at. There's a ton of great content like this in there. And obviously, if you have any questions of Asterix, if you've got any, if you got any AI related projects or any projects, around LIMS, around lab informatics, or indeed tech, et cetera, that you might need some assistance with, or you might, be thinking about for 2025, by all means, hit us up on asterixinc.com. There's a couple different places on there you can reach out either via chat or via form to a member of our team, and we'll get somebody in touch with you and get a conversation going about how we might be able to assist there. So let's go ahead and wrap up the recording part.